Hello everyone. Let's talk about the idea of just one Bagua today. So as you know, there's many styles of Baguazhang in the world today, like Yin style and Chung style, Liang style, and there's many others too. But it all started in China with just one guy, Dong Haichuan. So I think about this because one of my first sifus in Baguazhang, Xu Gongwei, when I was studying with him, and he was very old. So in the 2000s, early 2000s, I guess it would be, he was already like somewhere around 90. So his experience in learning was from a bygone time almost. So anyway, I asked him about the other styles of Baguazhang that were different than the ones that I was learning. And he got kind of angry, and so he kind of shouted, "There's just one Bagua." And that kind of shocked me because he was never really too animated about talking about other styles of martial art, because we did that quite often, and he was really cool. He was happy to discuss other martial arts and kind of give me the information that he had and pass that along. So this always stuck out in my mind. So later I learned that in the 1930s, a time when he was already training martial arts, at that time people didn't talk about different styles of Baguazhang. And yes, Yin Fu and Chung Ting Hua were well known and had already acquired some fame, as had other martial artists that practiced Baguazhang. But still, people just talked about practicing Baguazhang. Nobody talked about, a style that belonged, a Baguazhang that belonged to any one person other than Dong Haichuan. But I guess over the years, people have added to the martial arts they've developed and sort of gone in their own ways. So in some way, it makes sense that we can talk about the different types of Baguazhang. But really, I think when you go back to the source and really the underpinnings of these martial arts, they all have a common tie. And I think it's maybe, as my instructor, my Sifu, tried to tell me, better to think of Baguazhang as just a single art. So I have to admit that one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was first learning Baguazhang was to think that what I was learning was the truth, the whole truth, and everything that there was about Baguazhang. So I would laugh when I saw other schools, for example, that I could watch their walking, but it didn't look like mud walking to me. So how could it be Baguazhang? But later I learned that it was mud walking. They just had a different focus, and I wasn't educated enough yet to recognize it. And I learned also over time that there's many different types of walking in Baguazhang, and they're all useful and good for their own purposes, and some of them don't resemble mud walking at all. So that was my experience. I try not to let my students stumble over the same stepping stone, I guess. So yeah, I'll never forget that. So in my wanderings, training in Baguazhang, so I've trained in Chung style, and so Chung Ting Hua, his background was largely in Shuijiao, which is kind of Chinese folk wrestling. In fact, there is no one Shuijiao either. It's like a folk art, and it differs from place to place, and he just happened to be good at the art in Beijing, where he, well, actually, he's from Hebei, so he was good at the art there and in Beijing at the time that he lived there. When he met Dong Haichuan, he dropped all of that and just learned Baguazhang. But still, because of his background, his movements were kind of large and smooth, and his stepping was very rooted. Maybe you might consider it kind of slow and purposeful, but powerful. And his arms were very sensitive and had good skills at following other people's movements and then reacting quickly. So you can see that influences behind his so-called style of Baguazhang. Yin Fu, on the other hand, had a long fist background, as did Dong Haichuan mostly. And Yin Fu's movements, his strikes were quick, fast. His stepping was agile, and he relied on positioning or maybe repositioning his body quickly in different orientations in his methods. So his martial art, you can see that aspect of in Yin Bagua pretty clearly too. And others had different influences, and they had also learned from Dong Haichuan, so other flavors of Baguazhang grew out of that as well. Throughout my training history in Baguazhang, and I've come to find that every style seems to have some very strong common underpinnings. And one of those is the concept of the trigram. And you see that 3 lines, a picture of 3 lines, and usually it's arranged around a circle, and you'll see 3 solid lines and 3 lines, sometimes with 1 or 2 of the other lines broken. And really, by the time you go around the circle, you've had all combinations of solid and broken lines in groups of 3 that are possible. So I haven't seen a style of Baguazhang yet where that isn't sort of the basis of all the movements. And what people seem to do is that they associate the bottom line with maybe the hip area. They call it qua. And it culminates in maybe use of the legs and feet, footwork. And then the middle line is usually associated with what we call the kidneys, but it's not exactly the kidneys, but that area. It culminates in use of the waist. And then the upper line is associated with the heart, which culminates in use of the shoulders. So each of these can be used basically in a way that's very solid and rooted, and that kind of power is indicated by a solid line, not broken. And at the same time, that attribute, any of these 3 attributes, can be associated with a movement that's agile and flexible. And not to say it doesn't have power, but the movement is quick and light and, I guess just more agile. So any of these 3 attributes can have either of those properties in general. So the methods that a person uses will depend on how do you use your waist, how do you use your hips, and how do you step, and how do you use your shoulders. And when you combine the 2 possibilities in each of those aspects of your body, you come up with kind of 8 different strategies for using your body in martial art. So I'm glossing over that. That's also very deep. Maybe we'll do a video at some point just talking about that. But that's a common underpinning in every type of Baguazhang that I've learned. And I think it's fitting that the name is, when you translate it, as 8 trigrams, the 8 trigram palm. But then there's another aspect that is shared, in that the use of each of these parts of the body are used largely in turning motions. So, even when you might see an arm move straight, well, the shoulders are turning, and that's explored deeply. So that ties all the styles together quite strongly, in my opinion. There is something else, and then it's I learned this from my Sifu Yongguo Tai, who I have to say was probably the major influence in my Baguazhang. He initiated me officially and graduated me officially. And I learned the deepest, so far, the deepest secrets, so-called secrets from him. Anyway, the thing is that the main thing I learned from him in terms of martial art is that the best strategy is to don't rush to strike or throw, but rush to join with your opponent, rush to connect, and don't be anxious. So you think about that. It has there are a lot of corollaries that flow from that. I found it to be maybe the most important piece of information that I learned in my martial arts journey. So that strategy, control rather than rush, is also common to all styles of Baguazhang that I've learned to date. Anyway, from that, I think it's reasonable to see that Baguazhang is really just one art, but can be expressed in at least 8 different ways, because each of these trigrams will lead you to having to adopt different methods, or maybe you could look at it like different methods will be most useful for people of each of those combinations. I don't know. What do you think about all this? Does it make sense? I'm looking forward to your comments. Okay, bye for now.